All right, well, we'll transition to NFL. Franchise tag deadline was, I think, like 5 o'clock today or something.
Yep.
Yeah, buddy.
What do the Detroit Lions need to do? Obviously, Dan Campbell's got like a 6-year deal, so it sounds like they're buying time. How should they address this specific offseason and draft to at least get closer to that where they need to be?
Well, I think a lot of it has to do. Obviously, they made the decision today on Galladay. Not to say they won't attempt to re-sign him, because I think they'll at least kick rocks there, but or see what happens. But I don't really think they're going to. I think Galladay will find somebody that'll pay him more than the Lions are willing to pay him right now, and so I think receiver is a big focus, at least in free agency.
Well, they got. Did they agree to terms with Tyrell Williams?
Yeah, they just got Tyrell Williams.
They did, but I still think they need another option beyond that.
Tyrell could be a number 2, though.
He could, but yeah. I'm not saying they need to go find a number 1. I just think they need. I mean, they don't.
Quintez Cephas. Quintez Cephas is the future.
Okay, he's not.
he's the truth. He's like Siku, the truth.
Dude, AJ Green.
He's not. I think it's just building depth there, and just maybe just finding a guy. Yeah, I mean, another number 2 receiver is fine. They don't need to go out and get a number 1 and spend a crap load of money. I don't think they necessarily need to focus on that in the draft unless it just makes sense in the moment. Depending on if somebody falls to them or depending on what ends up happening with the draft, it might make sense, like we've talked about before. But I think receiver needs to be a focus, and then I would just say building some depth on the defensive line. I think if they could find something there, maybe an edge, maybe some sort of pass rush, defensive tackle. I think the focus, though, needs to remain on the future and not necessarily you can't mortgage, your team on a big free agent signing. You can't just ruin the next 3 years of financial flexibility, because they've opened up some space here now. Where they've got some flexibility now, especially in the coming years, to maybe do some stuff, maybe make a big splash 2 or 3 years down the road when you're hoping to be better. They got to realize, hey, and I think they do, just because the Dan Campbell contract is 6 years, they dealt Stafford, they didn't franchise tag Galladay. I think they're understanding, like, hey, this is not going to be a 1 year, 2 year rebuild. I think it's it's got to be a long-term process here. So I think they get it, but at the same time, I think they need to stay the course there and just understand, like, look, it's not going to be great here for a year, probably 2 at least. So I think they need to maintain financial flexibility. So that means maybe signing some guys. It reminds me of, like an MLB team rebuilding. Like, okay, you look at the Tigers right now. Not a Tigers fan at all, but you look at the Tigers right now. They have some guys on the team that should not be on MLB rosters, right? And especially in the past 2 years, they've had guys on the team that should not be on MLB teams. But they are, because it just makes sense financially when you're trying to rebuild, right? And you might strike gold on 1 or 2 of them, or you might find some good depth pieces on 1 or 2 of them that down the road you can either trade for more value, or you can or you can hold on to for depth. And I think that's kind of where the Lions are. It's like, look, anything you're going to get right now is either going to be hopefully dealt down the road for more value, or it's just a depth piece. I don't think you need to go out there and make a big splash. I just think you got to be, you're all you're trying to do is field a decently competitive team at this point. So,
yeah, I think wide receiver is definitely a need. I think that's like obvious. I just don't want them to. I don't want them to get someone like a number 1 option at really any position where they're thinking of drafting, because I would hate for them to back up a truck and pay a lot of money to a veteran, and then they draft that position at
Jesse James.
Yeah. Like if they're gonna go with Micah Parsons, I would hate to like sign a big linebacker, like or if they like really want like Jamar Chase, like don't pay a ton of money to a number 1 overall wide receiver. I know wide receiver is a little more flexible, but still, like, I want that, like, whatever you're thinking of with the draft, because that's the thing with the Lions is the draft is the main focus right now. Because anyone you really sign in free agency, if they're coming off a rookie deal, because that's like that's like the youngest you're going to get them is if they're coming off a rookie deal. Like those guys are going to be competitive, like, or those guys are going to be get like 30 plus once the Lions might be competitive. So you don't want to like have this guy like, yeah, you just don't want to get someone and focus on free agency when you really need to start building through the draft, which is like guys who are going to be hitting their prime when you want to be competitive in 5 or so years. So one wide receiver I really like just because I've liked him since college is Corey Davis. If they can get him for like a 3 or 4 year deal for like around $8 million, maybe $9 million, like I think he's a good player. I think like he's not a number one option on most teams, but just his size and athleticism can make him a number one option.
Could be for the Lions, yeah.
And that's what I like. Having two number two, like Tyrell Williams is probably a low number two if I sit and think about it, and like comparative to most number twos across the league. But like, it worked for the Lions when they had even after the year after Calvin retired, they had Golden Tate and Marvin Jones. And like those are two number two receivers at most rosters on that time, and it worked out. And they were inexpensive. That's why the Lions chose not to pay Marvin Jones this year, and they chose to trade Golden Tate for what looked like actually a pretty solid deal at that time. This year, Geronimo Allison. Yeah, we get Geronimo Allison and Quintez Cephas as the only wide receivers that are currently under contract for the Lions, and Geronimo only is under contract because he opted out for COVID last year, so he stays under that contract.
Right.
But like everybody else, they've got to replace like Sanu and Amendola is gone. Jamal Agnew's a free agent. Galladay and Jones free agents. So they don't have anybody this year, and so I think getting Tyrell Williams is obviously a nice piece. I think wide receiver, if it's whether you draft like Sage Surratt or Terrace Marshall from LSU later in the rounds or whatever, if you don't go after Jamar or Javonte or Waddle in the first early round, then that has to be an option you address. And you may have to get two, but I would like them to get stock up on draft picks. And like Adam Schefter tweeted 2 days ago that the Lions were even shopping Chase Daniel and teams are calling on Chase Daniel. Yeah. If you can get even a scrub 7 or a 6th round pick, fill up that 6th and 7th round pick with all the guys that you don't want on your roster anymore. Try to get anything. Yeah. Because this year they don't even have a 6 or a 7, and Brad Holmes has proven to been able to draft pretty serviceable guys that contribute in 6th and 7th rounds. So, like, give him a chance. Let him try.
Well, I think that's kind of like one of the reasons I like a Corey Davis type at wide receiver, but just not talking about wide receiver specifically, but just in positions like trying to get a guy who is maybe like a number 2 or kind of underutilized or overshadowed in the team that he's coming from, and then like give him a bigger role and see if he can break out and you can trade him. Like, I think that's, if you're going to go with someone who's in their late 20s, someone who's like even like young 30s, I think that's something you got to be looking at. It's like, can we find a guy who's not terribly expensive, who like we could just give a huge role to? Like he was the 3rd best lineman on a team. Like, let's make him our best lineman. And then like, let's see if we can get a 2nd round pick for him. Let's see if we can get something for him, and like, just see what you can do, because that's the thing. Like I was saying earlier, like if like Corey Davis, for example, just like if you picked him up, he was your number 1 overall, like wide receiver. And then he has a 900-yard season, like you can trade him for a 2nd and a 3rd, maybe, like to a team that's like needs something extra. Like, yeah, like I think that's got to be part of your mentality with when you're like in free agency, is like, okay, this guy's not going to stay with us for like you should not be signing more than 3 or 4 year contracts. I don't think you should ever do that. But if you're a rebuilding team, like 3 year contracts should really be your max, and you really shouldn't pay anyone over $10 million. Like, that's really like what I would look at with free agency, and then just fill up those things, and then fill up through those kind of means. I think that's the thing. You gotta, like, if you're the Lions, you can't get in a bidding war over anybody. So like set up, okay, we need these few positions. We don't want to go this many years. We don't want to go over this many dollars a year, and then find guys that fill that need, instead of saying like, oh, like we could so use Trent Williams, and like in a bidding war with 6 other teams, and then all of a sudden you're paying a lineman $15 million, and no one, like, why would you do that? Like, he's gonna be retired by the time you're competitive, so why are you doing that?
Right.
Yeah. If you can get a receiver for under $10 million, that's got to, and they're like, Juju is also going to be a free agent. Like Allen Robinson got franchise tag today. Chris Godwin got franchise tag today. But like Juju's still out there. Will Fuller, Corey Davis, Curtis Samuel, Antonio Brown.
I like guys. Yeah, not Antonio Brown, please. But like I like the Corey Davis idea, or a guy like even like a Curtis Samuel, like a guy that's like has talent, has proven themselves.
Still young.
Still relatively young.
Yep.
You know, Corey Davis is a veteran, I guess, in the league. Like he's been in the league for.
It'll be his 4th year, I think, next year.
Maybe his 5th. But like he's been around, but at the same time, like, you know, and hasn't really. I mean, I don't know. Like some people thought he was going to be like it.
Yeah, I mean, he was an early top 15 pick, I think.
Yeah, top 15 pick, but he came out of Western, so like it's you know, you never know. But like that, he's a very solid number 2 and could be a number 1 on a team like the Lions. He'd probably be a number 1 on like 10 teams in the NFL, and the Lions are probably one of them.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I like a guy like that. And there's a couple other guys out there like that, and that makes sense, you know. But at the same time, if you're going to look at another position, I think I would not go anywhere other than the trenches. You know, Joe
Tooney is going to be a free agent. We'll see if that's.
I mean, you're probably gonna have to pay him, but talk about a guy that you know what you're gonna get.
I was gonna say, if that's the only guy that they pick up in free agency, I am down with that one. The other reservation with wide receiver is that they're so backloaded, especially in this draft. I think there's a lot of potential talent like in the back 3 rounds. So you're looking at Terrace Marshall, Amon-Ra St. Brown, like Chris Olave is probably going to be a 2nd or 3rd, but Tony. I always want to say Shaka Tony, but I think it's it's not Shaka. It's the Florida wide receiver, Kadarius Tony.
He was on. He played for Penn State.
Yeah, there's just guys that I think you can. And wide receiver is just one of those positions where I feel like it's those players are already established athletes, so it's just basically your coaching. It's going to be your coaching basically from there on out for the most part, I feel like, for wide receiver. And that's same with running back.
And I think one of the things too with free agency, and like I know this is a very like cliche thing to say with rebuilding teams, but like with these younger guys you're pulling in and the guys you already have, like get a savvy veteran. Like there's nothing wrong with giving a decent like contract to a savvy veteran who's just going to help guys out. Because like I think that's the thing. Like, I know I say this now, like 6 months away from the season starting and like very optimistic, but like if the plan is to be competitive in 5 years, if you go 0-16 the next 2 years, who cares? Like, I know I say this 6 months removed, not actually watching games and being mad when they're losing every Sunday, but like you don't have to have the mentality to be competitive this year. Just don't. Who cares? Like if you're thinking, "Ooh, this guy will help us win some games in October," like who cares? Like no one wants that. No one needs to spend millions of dollars on that. So everything should have some bit towards the end goal of being competitive in 5 years. So if you're going to spend a lot of money, make it a veteran who's going to teach your younger guys. If you're going to like sign a guy and like you just got to think everything points to competition in 5 years. So if you make decisions now. And we know with cap and we know with contracts that decisions now can hurt you in 5 years. Like make your decisions based on being competitive in 5 years and then like just figure it out with that in mind. Because if you start trying to be competitive this season and you try to say like, "Ooh, this is a really good guy and he's going to like he might help us win a couple games so we don't look as bad." It's like, dude, no one cares.
Right.
Like, no one cares about winning a game in 2021 or 2022.
I mean, you want to see improvement probably in 2022, but whether that means they're 0-16 next year and like 4-12 the year after that, I don't want to see two 0-16 years. No matter if that means they have the first overall pick, every single one of those, you got to see improvement. Otherwise, you feel like you hired a dud.
Well, I was being superfluous for sure.
Yeah. Well, I think I agree. I mean, we all are in agreement. This offseason and free agency specifically needs to be inexpensive. And I think the best route is to probably grab high character guys that have like a passion for winning. Because if you're gonna
get what you want, yep, they got
Yannick Ngakoue.
Yeah,
Antonio Brown.
Yeah, some of those guys are on the no-fly list for Detroit, I feel like. But they have to have a passion for winning. but yet play with high motors, because you have to have the passion for winning, knowing that you probably aren't going to win. Yeah. And I think they have to also have a willingness to like groom the next generation of NFL athletes. Like some guys are like totally cool with being like, yeah, I'll try to mentor this guy and take him under my wing. But other athletes like Carson Wentz was like, I ain't no slouch to Jalen Hurts. I ain't going to help her. Big Ben was like, no one's taking my spot. Like you can't have that kind of arrogance for a team that you know is not expected to win for the next couple of years. So I think I want to see every player pretty much on this line's roster available for trade. And I want to see Brad Holmes like actively shopping these guys as much as possible before a free agency really hits, try to cut some cap and then snag some extra 5th, 6th, 7th round draft picks for this year, since Detroit doesn't have any picks, I think, after 188. They don't have any in the 6th or 7th round.
Right.
I just want to give Brad Holmes as much of an opportunity to build that way.
If you got some of these players who like just haven't seen the field much, who you've like drafted in the 4th, 5th, 6th round, like don't load up on that position in free agency and like let's see if these guys are something. Like
I want Quintez Cephas to be number 2 this year.
Seriously, like maybe number 3. But
he sucks, and then
Yeah. But that's the thing. I think that's one of the things. Is like, don't just get one of these guys who you can hide behind a veteran, and then you're like, well, he's going to be good in 3 years. It's like, no, is he good now? Like, is he showing promise now? I should say, not is he good now, but like, is he improving every year? Is he?
You might as well have a baptism by fire here, and then see if they're any good, and if they're going to get better throughout the year, and if they do, great. And if they do well, then you can move on.
What's the punt returner's name?
Jamal Agnew, yeah.
Dude, throw him in every offensive position and just see what you have.
Free agent now, but yeah.
Like, make him, I know, but like a guy like that, a guy that can't find a spot anywhere, who's just been moved around a lot. Like, just throw him everywhere. And see
they drafted Jason Huntley and gave him away for nothing.
Yeah.
Jason Huntley could have been that guy that could have moved around, but good stuff. We'll talk more about we'll do mock drafts later in the year. We'll do position prospect rankings as the year goes on, and we'll obviously recap free agency as it flows. But